eras in filmmaking. The budget was $52.5 million. At that point, the most expensive movie made in Australia to that time. Film generally went very smoothly in production, which is amazing when you see these numbers. I can't imagine. I feel so sorry for the line producer of this film. Just look at the number of bodies, costumes, props, sets. God, this film would have aged me 20 years. The only major problem was Nicole Kidman fractured 2 ribs. She claimed it came in the corset scene, which is ironic because Vivien Leigh claimed that the corset scene in Gone with the Wind cracked one of her ribs. So 2 ribs, and she also fell in a key sequence, further damaging her ribs. And so she is taped up for about 70% of this film beneath her costume. She also injured her knee while rehearsing one of the dance costumes. The shooting schedule was 90 days. It took 130. So he went 40 days. That's almost 8 weeks over schedule. And then he had to get out of the stage for Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which had booked the big stage in Australia. And they had to go to Madrid to do some of the pickup shots on the exterior. Baz Luhrmann wrote that my whole stylistic premise has been to decode what the Moulin Rouge was to audiences of 1999 and express that same thrill and excitement in a way that contemporary moviegoers can relate to. And I think, for the most part, he succeeds in this goal. So you've got an MTV generation soundtrack, anachronized, clearly anachronistic from the first music we hear. It does not fit the period. Welcome to the postmodern musical. The stylistic visual choices in this also echo music videos, swirling camera moves, loud music, extreme dancing, and frenetic cutting. There are, in some musical numbers in this film, 125 cuts. It's pretty remarkable. And where do the movies come from? Chama Chama from a Hindi classic called China Gate, The Show Must Go On by Queen, arranged in operatic format, David Bowie's rendition of Nat King Cole's haunting melody, Nature Boy, heard at the beginning and end of the movie, Lady Marmalade by Patti LaBelle, Madonna's Material Girl, heard 3 separate times, Like a Virgin, also Madonna, so she's a pretty strong influence in this, Elton John's Your Song, the title number of The Sound of Music, Roxanne by The Police, and as I mentioned, Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, a song that appears in no other film. This film uses so much popular music, in some cases 4 bars of some songs. Every one of those songs had to be licensed. It took Baz Luhrmann 2 years and $500,000 to secure the song rights for Moulin Rouge. It was supposed to come out in Christmas 2000 because he went so far over on the shooting. It was delayed, which Fox felt cost them probably $20 million. Would have made another $20 million had it come out at Christmas. So instead it premiered at the 2001 Cannes Film Festival as the opening night, and it received generally very positive reviews. Selected by the National Board of Review as Best Film, and it won Best Picture at the Golden Globes, and also 13 BAFTA nominations. That was the British Academy Awards. It was the most nominated film in that ceremony, and it won Best Picture and Best Director and Best Supporting Actor for Jim Broadbent, who is the only actor in the movie who does not sing his own material. There is no post-dubbing in this movie. Ewan McGregor, that's his voice. Nicole Kidman, that's her voice. Every other voice, except for Jim Broadbent, the ringleader MC, is actually their voices. Pretty radical move for Baz Luhrmann to cast non-singing actors and make them sing. And the music is there to help a lot. But I think ultimately the strategy works. There was a very funny, famous joke by Whoopi Goldberg when the film was nominated for Best Actress and Best Picture and Best Screenplay and Best Cinematography and Best Costumes and Best Art Direction and Best Sound and Best Editing. Whoopi Goldberg, and of course Baz Luhrmann was not nominated. Whoopi Goldberg said, well, I guess Moulin Rouge just directed itself. It's ironic, the only original song for this movie, co-written by Baz Luhrmann, called Come What May, was disqualified. Why? Because it had been written not for this movie, but for Romeo and Juliet. And it was cut out of Romeo and Juliet. But under the Academy rules, you cannot take a song intended for another movie, put it in a different movie, and have that song be nominated. So it's ironic that the only new piece of songwriting is the only song that couldn't have been considered. You will see an incredible diamond necklace bestowed on Nicole Kidman in this film. It is the most expensive piece of jewelry ever made specifically for a movie. It would cost $1.75 million, supplied by Harry Winston Jewelers, and there was a representative from Harry Winston Jewelers right off camera the entire time this necklace was being used. It was never out of this minder's sight. So, yeah, insured for $2 million. The musical numbers you'll see are wild. Before the Like a Virgin number, the dancers were going all over the floor. In fact, one of them slid almost 30 feet. So they poured Coca-Cola over the entire floor to make it sticky. They then did the number, and it worked perfectly. All right, so you will see, how does this movie open? Like the most old-fashioned opens on the proscenium itself. And instead we see a conductor and an unseen orchestra playing first the 20th Century Fox fanfare and then the opening title movies, and all of a sudden we're back in time to a romanticized Montmartre, all musical opening, just song and image, until Ewan McGregor begins his voiceover almost 7 minutes into the film. So, this movie is like a series of fevered snapshots. It is not dependent on location. In other words, what's the situation? Where is it taking place? It's not dependent on dialogue. It's dependent on fantasy. And these are not real situations as much as they are poses. This film is kind of made up of moving postcards of the Paris of the imagination. And it seems somehow appropriate that it was filmed on sound stages in Australia, because it's as far away from the real Paris as Australia is from the real Paris. A character obsessed with love, and there's actually a musical format that's kind of the model for this. It was the comic operetta with Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy. Absurd plots, ridiculous settings, comedy and music put together in a very light operatic fashion. It's another way of looking at Moulin Rouge. But when the first major number in this movie is "The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music," you gotta say Rodgers and Hammerstein would be a little bit spinning in their graves. As we mentioned in all the musicals, this requires a suspension of disbelief. It's a different kind than our suspension of disbelief in Meet Me in St. Louis, where we're asked to actually believe in the family. Here we're asked to believe in artifice, to believe in effect, to believe in fantasy. So we have a psychedelic sexual Tinkerbell coming out of a bottle of absinthe. We have can-can dancers who are right out of Las Vegas. We have a director who rewinds the characters' movements and what they say and then fast forwards through a song, never letting you forget you are watching a movie. You know, whatever you think of Nicole Kidman as an actress, in my mind, she is the bravest contemporary actress working today. She has worked with the most difficult directors like Lars von Trier. She has consistently tested herself in risky independent movies. She did 180 takes of a scene for Stanley Kubrick in Eyes Wide Shut, and she gave herself over totally to Baz Luhrmann in this movie. She basically said, whatever you want me to do, I'm game. And I think this is the performance of her career, actually. Madonna keeps popping up. So does Marilyn Monroe in Abstentia through Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. Another film played to a different message in this movie. And it's a riot of design, music, and movement that makes it almost impossible to figure out the plot. But the plot is the least important element here. Because what's the plot basically? Boy meets girl. Boy gets girl. Boy loses girl. Girl dies. That's pretty much it. So we can say this is the poster child of the postmodern musical. This is the musical Coen Brothers film that they will probably never make. And it's a movie where pretty much it's impossible physically to determine where you are. Sets turn into environments, environments turn into fantasies, fantasies turn into reality. And you know, this is kind of the logical extension of the jukebox musical that we experienced with Grease, and that then went on to, you know, Jersey Boys and all these other ones. Well, none of these songs belong in Paris. They were all picked out of the jukebox of Baz Luhrmann's musical interests. And they bear no relationship to each other, the setting of the characters. And yet they work. Or at least you'll tell me if you think they work. As in most musicals, miscommunication, misunderstanding abound. You remember how long we took the mistaken identity theme in Top Hat, remember? Before she realized she had the wrong guy. He lifts the same idea. Doesn't take quite as long in this film, but for the first third of the movie, Nicole Kidman is under a complete misapprehension as to who Ewan McGregor is. So, again, I got to believe Baz Luhrmann watched Top Hat in preparation for this film. The orchestrations help the non-singers considerably. Nobody, if they had to sing a cappella version, they would have been in big trouble in this film. So the music really helps. And again, the way the music is edited, orchestrated, arranged, is really incredible. Like a Virgin, remind you of Busby Berkeley musical number on acid in this film. We even have flamenco dancing turned into the mix. So, you know, this is a movie that you almost think the plot is over at 90 minutes, and then there's another 40 minutes for even more excess. Musical numbers are reprised. Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, I think, comes back 3 times. And then, of course, Nature Boy comes back at the end. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy, and that is our protagonist, Ewan McGregor. All right, so I'll talk a little more about the movie afterwards. Let's take a 5-minute break, come back, and open yourselves up for the experience of Moulin Rouge.